Please welcome our last speaker for today. Here's Robert Bäckström from Aurora Punks, and he'll tell us today how to don't die in the indie death.
Yeah, I'll do. Hi, everyone. Thanks for staying up this late, or the whole day. I'll admit it's been a while since I did an online talk, and bear with me if there's any difficulties to understand me or hear me or anything. Just let me know. And also, I guess there's chat here, so if there's any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we can just take the chats afterwards. So yeah, with that, let's start. I'll give you a little background to who I am and what I'm trying to do. The reason why I call this talk "Don't Die in the Death," which is rather morbid, is because I've seen quite a few studios starting with this great plans for the future, and they most of the times they've been starting around this great game idea you have, and I mean that's what we are. What I love with games is that it's very passion driven, but I also seen a lot of studios be quite quickly collapsing on its way there, and I mean we all know the indie space is super crowded, and there's just so many difficult challenges you need to overcome to stay around and be able to execute not only your first game but the ones after. And here are a few pointers or a few ideas or learnings I made from my career, and I just I'll share them with you, and they are by no means like wisdom that's like the only truth out there, but I think you might be able to find some good info from there. So, as I said, I think once we saw the past in the death, and like when I mean, if you go really way back, with the release of Steam, or when Steam came around and you were able to sort of circumvent the physical distribution. I mean, obviously you built a beautiful play field there for indie development, and also if you move onwards, there was like you removed a lot of challenges for releasing games or creating games, and then moving onwards with the release of tools that allowed you to not be like allowed you to create games on a much smaller budget, like with Unity or Unreal. I mean, that's a lot of really good things for us, but it also means that same as when music became available, or music instruments and home recording equipment got available, it means that there's so much, the competition is much more fierce. There's so many more people out there, so many more developers out there creating games, and it's just like the fact that I mean the market can't support all of us, so it means that you need to be you need to punch above your weight to survive, and I think there's a few things that you can do to do that. And the things I will speak about here will focus a lot about teams rather than just the projects, and it will also focus about how you build your team and what you think about this first. Like I'm not talking about the long term like evolution for a studio. I'm talking about those first 2-3 years. But first, a little bit about me. I've been in games for 15 years now. Prior to that, I was actually in film and music. I was part of like ran a production company that did small commercial ads and music videos in Sweden. I'm still situated in Stockholm, but I've been abroad and all different parts of Sweden for parts of my career. My first part in games was founding Fat Shark, where I stayed for 12 years. And Fat Shark today is I think most common known for Vermintide 1 and 2. But we've done quite a few different games prior to that. And then I think important in this is like the fact that Fat Shark tried for, I think our first success was 2014. That means 8 years later from when we were founded, we actually got our first breakaway hit with Vermintide 1. And I think there's a lot of the things I talk about today in this talk is actually experiences from that time and what we did and what we didn't do that sort of formed us as a company. So anyway, moving onwards, in 2018, I decided to move from development and going into the biz dev and publishing side. So I joined Raw Fury, which is situated, I mean, based in Stockholm, but it's a very global publisher. And I'm sure most of you seen and heard it. Like the latest very successful release would be Dome Keeper that they did a couple of weeks ago, but prior to that, they've seen great success with Kingdom and Sable, of course. And I was part of I worked as a producer for West of Dead, Mosaic, and Sable. I stayed at Raw Fury for 2 years, but in early 2019, I met a group of students in the northern part of Sweden who wanted to form a studio. They approached me because I was doing angel investments. I still do, and asked me for some advice and if I could invest in them. And this sort of led to what later became Aurora Punks, which is one way. I'm not here to market Aurora Punks and what we do as a way to survive as an indie, but I mean, it's definitely one answer to it. And what the challenges they faced as a small indie studio is also something that led to Aurora Punks, and it's also a few of the insights that I talk about today in this show. So, as I said, I think even though it's about games and a great game is obviously like that's the thing like we look at and we play and we feel about. But for me, when I am approached by a new team or studio or any team, I mean, I quite quickly I look at the game because that's where the quality is. But I always want to go back behind the scenes and look at the team. And for me, that's so much like that's where you can sort of see where this is heading. So I think a team is the most important component in if you look at the studio. Like the IPs, the games, and the ideas to games they might have is great, but they are all results of the team. So I think what I would like to speak about today is mostly the team, and why I think it's important is several, but I mean one idea could have one idea I have, and I think it's shared with many, is like any team, like first game from any team is like seldom a success. Second game is unfortunately seldom a success either. Like obviously there's exceptions to this where there's a breakaway hit from the first game, but most of the time this is a process. But once you go to your second or third or fourth game, I think the chances of success is increasing dramatically if you stick to certain points, which I will get to. And I mean, this is not something that's like only for me. Like a lot of investors, a lot of publishers knows that. Like I mean, they look for long-term partners, and the fact that they invest in one game only is sort of to minimize the risk. I would argue it's actually increasing the risk, but there's a lot of publishers that do an initial investment into a game, a project, and once it's successful, they most likely would want to invest further into the team because they know that's where the real benefit will be, both in terms of sequels, but also in terms of like just maintaining that team and the knowledge that's been built in that team. And this actually, I listened to a talk a couple of months ago where this with A16Z, and they talked about when they, even though they have all like, if they actually talk about Tencent, but I think they go for everyone, like with this teams of hundreds of scouts look at games, and they can't really predict what's going to be a successful game or not. They say that one way to prevent this is actually like we can't predict a good game, but we can predict a good team, and I think that's something that is there's some value into that. Where a game is sort of like, if you look at a game, there's the value you build into a game only lasts up until release, and possibly like post-release as well. When if the game is successful, you can obviously draw to it, but it sort of ends with that release. While the value you build into a team is obviously kept even after the game is released. So if you have your team, your studio, and all the learnings, all the tools you invest in, all the tech you invest in, it's going to stay even beyond the release of the game. And for me, that makes it important. Like when I work with a team, or if I invest in a team, I always like one question you might get from them is like, okay, so we have this game idea and we're working on it, but we're not enough people in the team. Should we use external consultants, outsourcing to reach that idea? And I think it's wise to be very careful with that, because what happened is like you're moving money that you could use to invest in the team and build it, and you help someone else build their team, because obviously the work for hire or external consultants working on your game, they gain knowledge, but it's not kept in your team. Like after the project is ended, they're most likely gonna move away somewhere else. But the reason why, why it's important to build your team is there's more than just the tech and the knowledge. It's a little bit like a football team. Like there's so many different roles, and you understand, like if you need a good star striker, that would help the team, but you also need like the people who's just the team players. You need like the experienced ones who can sort of support when it's like challenging times, and you need the young ones with a lot of energy, and all of this is coming together. And same as a football team, like you can't just put 11 random players on the field and expect them to start working together. This takes time, maybe years before you're coming together. And this is all about team composition. Also, you have your knowledge about yourself, but you also start building knowledge about your tech, and in the end, also the audience, the players, the one you make the games for. Like what's important for your players, and if you stick to a certain genre, you will understand how that audience reacts to things you do in your game. So that's why like sequels are such a value proposition for any publisher, because you know exactly, you have the first game as a template to use. You know how people reacted, what they're looking for, how you can sort of attract new players into that genre. So this is the benefits of building a strategy for your team. This also means like you need to stick to this. And when I meet new teams, I always try to understand what's their plan is, like beyond the first game. and I maybe as far as 5 years. Like even if the current project reaches 1 or 2 years, I would want to know, where are you in 5 years? What are you? Are you in Unity? Are you Unreal or proprietary engine? What's the reason for that? Like, are you going to stick into this? And what is the core competence you have in your team? Is there any like skill set you're missing, and how do you plan to attract that? Are you planning to use outsourcing for your art? Why is that? If okay, and maybe there's a good reason and good to know, and like, but what is the core competence? Or if you don't have it, how can you bring it into your team? And obviously I think it's important that you understand that what is your genre, platform, audience, and even business model. Are you free to play? Are you premium? And yes, for me to understand what like the clear plan from this game to the next one. And it's not always necessarily important you stick to the same genre, but at least you should have a plan. Like, we're doing this RPG, or we do this platform game this time, and in this platform game we're adding a dialogue system, and next game we're gonna do, because platform games are awful on Steam, like that genre is really difficult, we're gonna do an RPG, and we're gonna use that dialogue system from that first platform game in our next game, which is gonna be like an RPG. So just for me to understand where you're heading with the team is super important. And I'm that's not only me. I think there's a lot of investors or publishers who would want to know that. And even I think it's important for you, as you said, when you form your team and we form your studio around the project, which is most likely, like I guess most studios start with like, yeah, I want to make this game, and you attract some people around you, and you're married to this idea. But then as soon as possible, start thinking about what's after this game. How do we work with this game towards the next one? So how to make this happen? I mean, so is like, obviously the game is what will most likely bring your revenue. So you need to take as many shortcuts as possible to get that game out of the door, or get it to a state where you can get funding. And that funding might not always be, I mean, that funding is most likely tied into that specific game. So I think it's important to be, and I mean, and this is super difficult, I know, but you need to be very clever in your setup, so you sort of not become a one-trick pony, or not just tied into one project. So even if you get funding for your first game, try to think ahead of beyond release. If it's for a premium game, you'll get your funding up to release, but that's the final payout of your dev advances is on release day, maybe. If the game doesn't take off, what happens the month after? Like, there's still salaries to be paid. Have you sort of catered that into your plan? When did you start prototyping your next game and do publisher outreach with that? So I mean, always keep that in mind, and build a plan where you, I mean, the plan for your team is not the same as your plan for your project or game. It needs to be larger, and maybe it means like you need to have 2 teams and seek funding for 2 teams working on 2 different projects, or half the team doing work for hire and the other team working on your internal IPs. But you need to sort of lift your, like, not only look at the project, but lift and look what's beyond the project, the game. Also, when you have a plan for your project and your team, like, I mean, maybe taking decisions that's not the best for your project, but better for the team or the studio could be one way. I mean, one way forward. Let's say you have this super promising game pitch, and you sit with it, and you don't like, I mean, you think this concept is going to be very powerful, and you don't want to give up too much rev share on it because this is like so great. But maybe it's worth working with an external partners to have that funding and for this project, because that will lower the risk for the team and making sure you can also start working on your next project, even though like you gave away some revenue, because you'll have someone that can sort of back you. And maybe it could be good to take in a financial investor into your company for equity to sort of build that extra momentum, even though your current project looks very promising. I mean, that's always difficult, because obviously if a game is very promising and you manage to release it yourself or with as little external funding as possible, you will keep a larger part of the revenue, and that could also help you build long term. But I think it's important to always look further ahead when you look for whether you're going to publish or do like yourself self-publish or work with publishers. I mean, working with an external publisher also most likely will learn you a lot. Like there's every time you work with an external partners for whatever reason, I find myself learning so much new things on how like pipelines or routines, or like whether it's with first party or third party, and all that knowledge is very beneficial for your team. So I think it could also be something to take into consideration. So I think now I've been talking about the importance of building like a long-term plan for your team. I would like to call it sustainability, or like how to build a sustainable platform for your team. And there's a few things here I think it's really important. Like, first of all, you need to be opportunistic. So when you have an embryo or a fully mature good team, like do whatever it takes to make them survive. If it means pausing your current project and do work for hire because you need to, do it. Like, keep the team together. That's the most important thing in my life. Like, you can always revisit the project you were doing, or there was always been new projects, but the team, once you disbanded it, you lose so much. So keep it together, and always try to build competence. As I said, like if possible, rather do work for hire to others than using others to use work for hire to work on your project. Like, you should be the one that build skills and competence in your team. Obviously, diversify your revenue streams, meaning like several games, like release more single games, as like small games at a constant stream is better than like just waiting 4 years before you release that big chunk of game. Because I think it's, if you release small games, you can see as soon as possible, as quickly as possible, get it in front of the audience. You'll see which one takes off, and you can double down on that. Like, so releasing a lot of games is important. Not everyone will be successful, but it doesn't matter. Like, just the fact that you release a lot of games or get them in front of the public, that doesn't need that you need to monetize them, but just get them up on itch or like do soft launches or whatever. Get them out there and try to learn as much as possible. Also, combine different revenue streams, types of revenue streams. Like, working on original IPs is high risk, high reward. Like, that's your own IP. You keep all the revenue coming in from it, but it's also the one with the biggest risk attached to it. If you can work on work for hire, or if you can find any other type of revenue streams, like, depending on where your skill sets are and where you are in the world, I guess it's quite different. But anything that you can build to sort of be a platform where you can sort of have a large influx of different passive revenue streams, so to say, that's good. Your only goal is to stay floating, stay around, and find ways to continue work on your games over a long period of time. also try to stick to, like, if you have an understanding where you want to take your team, try to stick to that plan and build the skill set of your team and become like best in class. I think that's super important. Like, I know there's a few investors out there that are constantly investing in, like, not necessarily the specific genre, but they would want to invest in the teams or studios they think perform the best in their genre or platform or whatever. So once again, try to build a focused team where you know where you're heading. And obviously, I think creating a healthy work environment where there's room for creativity is also very important. Like having, and there's so many talks out there on how to achieve this that's better than mine, I think. But I mean, trust and actually, let me see. Yeah, I actually have a slide about this. I think building a team company culture where there's trust and safety, like everyone feels like they can sort of voice their opinion, and you also trust people to take their own decision is better. I think it's proven to work better for most companies. So I think if you spend resources, time, money, energy into this in the beginning, it's very it will give you a lot back later on. So don't take any shortcuts in this. And the company culture is something you create early on, and it will stick with you for the rest of like the company's career. So I think it's good to give this a thought from the beginning. So let's say now we have an understanding on, like, if we're gonna create a team, we need to build a plan to survive over 5 years, and we need to build a plan that allows us to find more revenue streams than just one project, and we need to build this healthy environment where people will stay and where we can sort of make sure that the creativity is like very in focus. So what about the projects? What's important here? And I think it's, when approaching like the projects, I mean, it's all about what platform you're focusing on. I mean, for clarity, I come from a premium PC console background, so a lot of my experience comes from that. Like, that's where I feel most safe. I find it very interesting with free-to-play mobile. I find it very interesting with like this upcoming Web3 type of games, but I don't know enough to talk about it. So this is mostly from a premium PC console setup, but I think some of it could most likely be used in another, like in a mobile environment, whatever. I mean, and few of them are like, this is like not a rocket science in any way. It's like most likely something we all can sign off on. Like, I think regardless, if you have a game concept, finding ways to try it early is important. So, and in order for you to try it early, you need to understand who you're going to try it on. You need to define your audience, and you also need to have a good thought about, like, where are you going to take this, and how you're going to monetize this and sell it. But I mean, there's, when I spoke about finding a lot of revenue streams, like, if you can find a way to release games, the sooner you can release them and get them tested in front of an audience, the better you will be off. Like, I mean, if you're able to release a PC game every 6 months on itch, and actually understand what is the key KPIs you want to look for that specific game, so you're in much better position than if you do like 3 years iteration on every game that you release, I would say. And then when you find something that really takes off, then you can double down on it and take it further. So with that being said, like I always I'm an advocate for something that's testable on screen, and it's always like, especially if you plan to reach out to someone, an audience or something like something. The first thing, it starts with a GIF, of course, and the GIF is like something you present on your social media or whatever, and that needs to attract attention. But as soon as possible, you need to follow that up with something that can be playable, and it needs to be playable with some, like, it needs to be very self-taughting. So if it's a complicated gameplay, it needs to be like very like a tutorial or something that's really easy to get in, like, because nowadays, I mean, the attention span is just getting smaller and smaller, I guess, for the younger we are, or also the fact that we have less time to focus on something. So if you can't get hold of, like, get into something early on, it becomes so much more difficult to actually attract them. And if you pitch for someone, not the audience, but like actually approach a publisher, I think it's important that you accompany the playable build with all the things that we talked about previously, like the team and like you showcasing an understanding of where you will take this and who your audience are and how you will build that audience together with the publishers. Because I've been with them on the publisher side, and building an audience, especially in the indie scene, is, I mean, we all know that's such a big investment, and we can't do it without the help of the developers. So yeah, okay. So here I talk about the GIF slide. So I mean, once you want to seek funding for your game, I think it's good. Like, it used to be in the old days that, like, you don't want to promote your game before you decide to reach investors or publishers with it, because you don't want to sort of spoil it for anyone. I think it's the opposite today, at least in the space. Like, if you can come with a concept to someone and you already built an audience for it, you have a Steam store page or a soft launch product, and you can show some like traction for it, regardless of how you measure it, it will be so much easier to find someone who want to put more money into it. So I mean, just find your channels. And that's also what I meant with, like, how you build value in your team. Like, for your first game, you will have to build those channels, but your second game, those channels is already hopefully much larger than it was before, and it makes so much easier to actually launch new concepts, new projects, new games to an audience, because you don't have to spend all this time to build your brand or build your channels. And I think okay, actually I got quickly. So building channels, like, if I were to prioritize how I would build a sustainable indie business, I would prioritize, like, the team first, find ways to make the team will survive the first project. Secondly, your audience, find ways to keep and build your audience from project to project. And the third one is actually the games itself, and the games are means to the team and the audience. Like, how can we improve, like, the experience for our audience? How can we make our team better? And that's where I think the games comes in. And it's sort of reversed thinking from, like, obviously we want to put out great games, but to put out great games, we need to build the foundation for it somewhere. Yeah. So this is, like, just the key takeaways which I just went through. And I think that's more or less everything I had to say. And I'm not sure, is there any, like, questions that we... make room for, or?
Yeah, we have time. So thank you for your talk.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
So I basically understood your basic idea. So it's kind of mm, um, how to say that it's not kind of startup idea, but it's more about like building a team and a company and continue repeating some actions and like at some point it should lead you to some success, something like
Mhm.
that, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. Like, I mean, that's what we do with it. So what when I'm not speaking at events like this, I'm running a indie game collective where we basically put like several teams working together to sort of be able to, like, because obviously like with several teams or several studios working together, there's always like new projects and making this easier. So that's, for us, it's sort of building a platform where we increases the chance for success for one of the teams, and hopefully that would trickle down to the rest of the teams as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's
You mentioned that you already invested in 5 studios, like an angel investment.
oh yeah, I
And
mean, yeah.
so the question was like, how are they doing so far? Like, uh,
They are still around, so no one died, so that's great. uh, they are I mean, they are still early startups. They haven't really released games yet, but they are close to being one. And I mean, I think that's good. And some of them have taken in more investors and additional rounds. So I think, which is, I mean, depending on where you are and what type of projects you're doing, that could be a thing as well. So yeah, they are all around at least. So I think it's good. Even though I don't expect, I mean, I think it's difficult. Like, I don't think all of the teams will stay around. So I mean, I would be happy if they all were around in 5 years' time. But I maybe yeah, you never know.
okay, that sounds interesting. And you mentioned that idea that like it's nice to have like teams in the same place, so they can exchange kind of some ideas, something. How does
Mm.
it work? Like, are they like physically located in some same
Uh,
location or something like that?
mm, I think no. I think a place could be virtual. So I think a Discord server could be a
Hmm.
place. I think it's the important part is finding ways to exchange ideas and like, for instance, in the Aurora Punks collective, we we try to find ways to work together. Like, we have like common Friday meetings between the studios where we showcase our projects, or we have cross-disciplinary, like all the programmers from the different teams meet up and talk about things. And we have like but we all spread across, like, we are mostly in Sweden but also in Europe. So but I mean, we try to find ways to get together, all of us. And I mean, we also meet physically once a year to sort of
So that 5 studios are actually what is Aurora Punks. Is it correct?
yeah. I mean, Aurora Punks is 5 studios plus like a marketing team and a development services team. So it's actually 7 studios. So we are about 50 people in total. Uh,
Uh-huh.
so so the teams are about, the smallest team is 4 people. The biggest is like 10, 11. So
Okay, got it. And do they have like any released games already?
yeah, we released a few games. We released, our first game was released uh, 2 months ago, Chancel Club, with the publisher, with Curve Digital, and we we are soon to release a second game, Blockem, and yeah, I mean, I mean, every team is obviously, I mean, there's indie team, so they'll there's no genre specific type, like a specific type of genre for every game, but most of them are like smaller indie teams, indie games. So smaller sizes, like maybe with a budget of or a team size of 5 people and a year or two of development. But we're looking at doing a few larger projects as well. But I mean, that's the thing. If you have like we are 50 people, so for me, I think I'd rather do 5 smaller projects spread across 2 years than one big project of 50 developers for 1 year. I mean, it's just because of the risk management and mitigation. So if we were going to do large projects, then we should be like 200 people doing 4 different large projects. I guess that would be a better setup.
Maybe. Yeah, but that's kind of sound like a very nice idea because, for example, in Ukraine we almost don't have any kind of events now, and for now, like it's almost impossible to share experience with anybody around.
Yeah.
So we have to work like inside our team only. No. Oh.
Is there any way, any ways to get like online? Like obviously this is an online, and I mean events like this, but also find this is a rather large thing. Is there like ways to set up reoccurring like game jams or something online instead that allows you to meet up?
Yeah, it's totally possible. It's actually possible to set up an offline events in Ukraine. So we had IT conference several weeks ago, like the biggest Ukrainian IT conference, not game development, but about IT itself in Lviv. I think it was like pretty fine. The problem is not that it's kind of impossible like it was during the COVID. It's more about that it's not kind of the most important thing right now. Like a lot of people left the country, and other people they're not so into events for now. Like they
I
have
totally get it.
different priorities.
Yeah, no, I mean definitely. I mean, I definitely see like the situation right now, and I mean, hopefully that will not. I mean, there will be a time after this as well. Like, so I think it's like also seeing what happens afterwards and looking forward and how to set things up. But I think I find it interesting to see what's happened. Like, if you look pre-COVID, like I think the last time I was at Games Gathering in Kyiv, it was just before COVID broke out. I think it was in was it 2019 or
2019? Yes.
Yeah. So I think COVID happened just after that. Like it was just closely after. So this, I mean,
three
and it feels
months
like,
after that.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting what happens. Like now, COVID is hopefully gone, and hopefully the war is like something. What happens afterwards as well is like, and in the world, like, will there be online events and offline events? I mean, we'll definitely see a hybrid, but I feel like it used to be a lot of online events that happened, and it also affected the market a lot because I think it was so easy to set up an online event and you do the Steam integration, and there's a lot of games wishlist farming during these online events, and it's almost so it feels like the market is oversaturated with those. So I think going back to more like a hybrid setup or like a mix of offline and online events is something we're gonna see. I think you can already see now, like just a couple of years ago, being part of Steam Next Fest with a demo was like a really big thing, and you could farm so much wish list. But nowadays, there's so many games. Like I don't know how it was, 300 or 400 demos last time, so it's just too crowded. So now you need to find new ways to promote your game, and like an online event itself, it's not enough. I mean, I don't know what's needed, what's the next thing coming that you need to add, but yeah.
We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. Thank you very much for your talk. I was happy to see you again. Hopefully,
Yeah.
we'll manage to see each other soon somewhere live.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'd love to.
Yeah, and I want to thanks to everybody who was with us today at Games Gathering Conference. Hope you enjoyed our talks, and I reminded you that on Thursday and Friday there will be 2 offline days in Bratislava. So if you have a chance to do that, please feel free to join them. I think you'll have a lot of fun there. Not personally you, but all the people that listen to us. So yeah, and I wish you to have a nice evening.
Same.
Bye.
Bye-bye.